Hello and welcome back to a new lecture on syntax. In the previous lectures we discussed X-bar notation when it comes to the noun phrase, verb phrase, adjective phrase, adverb phrase, and the prepositional phrase. Now if there's one thing we've noticed, it's that in each type of phrase the head is obligatory. Sometimes it is even the only obligatory part. But there are two more phrase types that we still haven't talked about and that really don't fit this equation so far. That is the CP and the TP. In our rules so far for CP, the C or the complementizer is optional. In TP as well, the T is optional. Now this is rather strange given that every other type of phrase has its head as the obligatory part. Why then is it the case that within the CP, the C is optional, and within the TP, the T is optional as well? For example, I could say, I know that he is nice, but I can also say, I know he is nice, without this. Therefore, within this CP, C seems to be optional. Likewise, the T seems to be optional as well. In this sentence, John will kick the ball. Will here stands in T, but it's also optional. I could easily say instead, John kicked the ball. Alright, so what's going on here? So far, our CP looks like this. We have an optional C. Our TP looks like this, where we have an optional T. So in every other type, the head is obligatory. In the CP and the TP, it seems as if they're not obligatory. And not only that, they don't seem to fit the whole X-bar schema. For example, we don't see any C-bar levels, for example. We also don't see any T-bar levels. This means we need to investigate CP and TP just a bit more. If we were to apply the X-bar schema to CP, then we would get a C-bar level, and we would have our C head, and its complement, of course, the TP. Now, to really get some insight into what the CP is and how it functions, we need to look at yes-no questions. A yes-no question is a question that you can answer with either yes or no. For example, did John eat his lunch? Has Mary done her homework? Is John your friend? And so what we know so far is that in a yes-no question, so take for example the sentence, John is your friend. To form a yes-no question, we move the main clause, the first main clause auxiliary, to the beginning of the sentence. Therefore we get, is John your friend? Now here's an interesting question. We know that the sentence or the main clause so far is what we call the TP. Where then is this auxiliary heading to? Where is it going? It seems like it's going to somewhere that is outside of the TP. But where? Could there be a CP on top of this TP as well? So how are we going to find out? Well, first let's try to locate exactly where this auxiliary goes during creating a yes-no question. Now in English, we can create the yes-no question again by moving the auxiliary before the subject. We call this phenomena subject-auxiliary inversion. So we move the auxiliary before the subject. Therefore we get, is John nice? But now the question is, can we do this same movement inside of an embedded clause? So again, we can move this is before the subject, and now we have is John nice. Now here we have an embedded clause, which we know is a CP because there is a complementizer. The question now is, can we perform subject-auxiliary inversion? So here we are. I know, is that John nice? This sentence sounds very ill-formed. Here's the second one. I know that is John nice. Again, this sounds horrible. Why might that be the case? Well, let's think about our suggested CP structure. We said our CP would involve a TP and a complementizer. If this is the way the structure of the CP is, therefore, we should get the complementizer that right here, and the TP, John is nice, right here. Now, if we were to move this is all the way up to here, would that work? It wouldn't work. How do we know? Well, because this is ill-formed. Here we are. Here we have the is right before the complementizer that. So here we cannot place the auxiliary. What about the second option? To have our auxiliary in front of the complementizer? Well, the problem is there is no place for it to land. And again, if it does go to C as well, as you can see, C is already filled with that. So apparently here we notice that we can't have two different things under the same node. But again, remember that in the case where there was not an existing CP, like here in these two, inverting the auxiliary before the subject was okay. So we can hypothesize that the complementizer has something to do with subject-aux inversion. Now there's a second way to create yes-no questions. English uses subject-aux inversion. Irish, on the other hand, has a dedicated particle that it uses to signal yes-no questions. That particle is R. A famous example found in Carney's syntax of Irish is the following. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I can actually pronounce this, but artichon, a word-for-word gloss, is Thit means fall, Sean means John, and R is the question particle, which does not exist in English. In English, this roughly means, or corresponds to, did John fall? Notice that in English we have the subject-auxiliary inversion. We invert the auxiliary did before the subject. But in Irish there is a question particle. Therefore, so far we can say that languages have two different methods to form a yes-no question. One is subject-aux inversion, and the other is the use of a question particle. So if the language does not have a dedicated question particle, then it might resort to subject-aux inversion. Now in Irish, the question particle sits under the C node, or the complementizer node. But recall that we are looking for universality. We are looking for the chance to make hypotheses about all the world's languages. We're looking for the similarities between languages. Now, just by looking at Irish, since Irish has this dedicated particle, Irish as well does not have subject-aux inversion. Now, basically what that means is that subject-aux inversion and question particles are in complementary distribution, which basically means that when one occurs, the other one cannot, and vice versa. Now, it is known in science that when things are in complementary distribution, that means they are instances or examples of the same phenomena. So let's make a hypothesis that can help us find similarities between the world's languages. What if we suggested that all languages of the world have a question particle? All of them. But the difference that we see between languages is probably this, that in some languages, the question particle itself is null. Null means that it is empty, okay? It is not pronounced. Great, so in English, we could say that here as well, under the complementizer, we have a question particle. But this question particle is empty. It is null. But let's suggest that in creating a question, next to this complementizer, we want this complementizer to be a question. So let's say we give it a plus Q feature, which means that this would designate this clause as a question clause. But the problem is there's nothing here to fulfill the question particle. So what does the language do? It borrows the first auxiliary from the main clause and it shifts it up to here to fulfill this need. So let's summarize really what we're saying here. We're saying here that in a yes-no question clause, the C wants to designate this clause as a yes-no question clause and therefore has a plus Q feature. A clause that is not a question would have, of course, a minus Q feature. So let's suggest that as long as you have a plus Q feature, then you need to have something pronounced under C. Great, but what is it? Now in Irish, they already have something that they can use, which is a question particle, are. In English, this is empty. We do not have a question particle in English. So what do? We borrow the auxiliary from the main clause and we put it under C. Therefore, we would get something like this. Is John nice? So let's summarize what we're suggesting here. We're suggesting that even in a declarative sentence, we have a CP root node. We used to suggest that this was a TP. Now we have an extra layer of CP on top. And what we're suggesting is that to form a yes-no question, we move the first auxiliary up to C when we want to make a question. Therefore, we get, is John nice? So now basically we're suggesting that even in main clauses, the structure is CP and then the rest of the TP, even if this was null. Is there evidence now for this? Is there evidence that we really need a CP? Let's see what evidence exists. Now there's a test that we've been using in our previous lectures, which is conjoining. We know that we can conjoin things that are likes, things of the same nature. So for example, I could say the man and the woman. Now if I know that the man is a DP, but I don't know what the woman is, I would resort to conjoining to test it. I can conjoin these two with and. Since they can be conjoined together successfully, that means that this must also be a DP. Here's a sentence that's pretty famous and used in this topic. You can lead a horse to water, but will it drink? So it seems like we have two clauses here. You can lead a horse to water and will it drink? These two sentences are conjoined by the conjunction but, like so. Now I know that this is a CP because I have what looks like subject auxiliary inversion. But I don't have subject auxiliary inversion in this one. This is what we used to call a TP. But now, since I know that this is a CP and I can see that they are conjoined successfully, that means this must also be a CP. So let's make this bold claim that every clause must have the following structure, regardless of whether it is a matrix or an embedded clause, a clause that is a question or a non-question. So practically everything, every type of clause must be a CP, embedding within it a TP. So now, this CP is what we call our sentence. Question clauses differ from non-question clauses in the feature that this C takes. If it is plus Q, then it is a question clause. If it is minus Q, then it is a non-question clause. Therefore, both of these clauses would start off the same. John is nice and is John nice. They both have a CP. Let's look at one more piece of evidence to the claims that we've been making so far. Now we said that English uses subject auxiliary inversion, and that English does not have an overt question particle like Irish. Actually, some argue that if is actually a question particle used in English. For example, in the sentence, John asked if he could play. This here is our CP, and now of course we know that all of this is a CP. Now this if here is what we're suggesting is a question particle in English. Now the difference between English and Irish is that Irish makes greater use of the question particle, whereas English does not. But apparently there is one, which is if, that is available to English. If that is the case, and this if is really a question particle, then we would expect that subject auxiliary inversion would be blocked when if exists. Let's see. Turns out our predictions are correct. Since if is a question particle, that means it sits in C. Therefore, there's no need to have subject auxiliary inversion anymore. We cannot bring in could. So this sentence is ill-formed. This one is as well. So in this sentence now we know exactly what's going on. We know that we have two clauses, like so, and that both of them are CPs, which are conjoined together, We know that in the first clause it is not a question, so it is minus Q. Therefore, it doesn't need a question particle and it doesn't need subject auxiliary inversion. We know that the second one is plus Q. It is a question. Therefore, either we have a question particle like Irish or in English if, and if this doesn't exist, we will have to perform subject auxiliary inversion. In this case it is will. So to summarize then, we made the claim in this lecture that all clauses are CPs, and we've motivated this with examples from YesNo Questions and evidence from conjoining. In the next lecture we'll take a look at the TP and investigate its structure in more detail. See you in the next lecture.